single bullet can take a human life, but the true cost is so much higher. The family that grieves, the friends who retaliate, the community living in fear. Demetrius watched a man die when he was only 12 years old.
The ambulance was just pumping his chest right in front of me, and I had my friends with me. They was crying. They had to go home. Everybody around me was crying.
Jamario's uncle, Jamar Clark, was shot and killed by police.
It made me feel like I was empty. It made me feel like I had nothing to live for.
Every Thursday night,
let's talk about trauma for a little bit.
These young men get together for the Man Up Club, a mentorship program where they talk about the hidden wounds they won't let others see.
Trauma is something that you just can't, if it happens to you, you can't just shake it off.
It's become popular these days to talk about community trauma, and a growing body of research approaches crime as a public health crisis, identifying emotional trauma as one of the primary factors behind violent crime.
1 year time I had 70 people from all over that I had dealt with that I kept hearing passed away. Wow. Things happened, or got shot, or got in an accident, or just 1 year I was like.
Ferone Brown knows trauma well. Back in the mid-90s, he was dealing crack cocaine in North Minneapolis, the same streets where today he's an outreach worker.
How are the streets different today than they were back when you were running?
Totally different.
Huh.
It was anarchy. Look, you can't go over here. It was structure. If you go over there and do something, you're going to get your head busted. Now it's they can do whatever they want to because they have no leadership. The leadership fell in the 90s. So now these guys are renegades.
Project Life is the city's effort to rein in the renegades, focusing on 110 chronic offenders on the north side, so-called impact players responsible for the vast majority of gang shootings.
Who are these 110?
The hardest guys that you could probably see on the streets. Every last one of them I've ever talked to said, Ferone, I want change. I want a job. I don't want to do this.
How many of these young men have had trauma in their life?
Probably all. When you wake up in the morning and there's no food in the house, that's trauma. When you got to go outside and you know that you got to keep something on you to protect you, that's trauma.
Everything that we do really revolves around knowing that these guys have experienced a lot of trauma.
Sasha Cotton is the director of Project Life, which cuts through the red tape to provide the young men with housing, education, job training, or therapy.
What we are saying is that there's an opportunity for you to change. And really, I think the philosophy we operate on is that we're all one bad decision away from being in the shoes of the young men that we're serving.
And it may be working. In 2 years, gang shootings have dropped by 50% on the north side, and only 7 out of the 110 impact players have been charged with a new felony involving a weapon, and only 1 impact player has died from homicide.
And when that guy passed away, I had him in a safe house, and he left. He left the safe house.
For Ferone Brown, it's a 24/7 job that often means showing up at crime scenes.
What are you doing when you show up at a homicide scene? What are you trying to do?
Talk to the family. That's the first thing I do. I go over to the family. If I know the kid or if I know the mom, which I usually do, I try to figure out what's going on. I talk about their kids, their family, because a lot of guys, when they say retaliation, they don't think about my mom is going to miss or my kids are going to miss me being present in their lives.
While Ferone Brown works the crime scene, Farz Shahir is waiting at the hospital.
And the hardest thing with individuals is catching them at a vulnerable moment in their life.
Shahir runs the Next Step program at Hennepin Health in North Memorial. A staff of 11 counselors meet with those shot or stabbed, sometimes connecting before they even go into surgery, focusing on the wounds doctors can't see.
How much of it's tied to trauma?
All of it. A lot of the individuals who are inflicting this pain on others are individuals who have been hurt themselves.
Of the 183 Next Step participants, only 5 have returned to HCMC with injuries, and only 1 participant was murdered. He was Jacob's brother.
How many relatives have you lost?
Too many. I lost too many relatives to count.
Shahir's been with the family from their first day in the hospital, offering guidance and support.
It's not about what he said, it's about what he did for me as a
as a mentor or someone I looked up to.
We often say, you know, what's wrong with you? Rather than realizing we need to be asking what happened to you.
Psychologist Mark Sanders supervises therapists in more than 200 schools, and trauma is a common thread.
Individuals are growing up with a lot of toxic stress. Physically, it has an impact. Your body kind of gets stuck in fight or flight, or on the verge of fight or flight all the time.
And it's possible to measure that trauma, what's known as adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Things like, do you have a parent in prison, a family member who's mentally ill, an alcoholic or drug addict? Were you emotionally, physically, or sexually abused? A Minnesota Health Department study found nearly half of us can answer yes to at least one. But among African Americans, 19% have 5 or more. For American Indians, 23%. The study found those with multiple traumas are less likely to have a job, a home, a spouse, and far more likely to be depressed, anxious, and in poor health.
There are scientifically proven impacts of having adversity early in your life that have lifelong kind of negative effects physically, emotionally, and socially.
People saying, you're Muslim, you're immigrant, you don't belong here. What are you doing here?
The city of Minneapolis is now taking Project Life to South Minneapolis, where they've heard from community leaders, Somalis, Native Americans, Mexicans, and Muslims, who say their problems are unique on the South Side.
And the trauma, the stigma of being Latino in this country is crazy right now.
The city says it knows one size will not fit all.
We're not saying that what works on the north side is what's going to work on the south side.
And yet, in some ways, the trauma can be the same. The ripple effects from a single bullet.